Welcome to the DSPN.
Team New Zealand's in trouble.
Oh, he's done it again, Ricky Hogan.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Righto, Sportos, here goes Marty, Devlin, Lachlan Waugh, the DSPN. Talking today's big sports stories. There'll be lots on the cricket, the consolation prize that is this third test. We will do a tight five where we run through 5 topics of the day to yak about. Special guests include Ryan Fox. How's that hip injury? He's got his PGA Tour card for next year. Look back at this year. Plus, who wins the Giggle Fest cash grab in Vegas? Live playing at PGA tomorrow. And that is Rory and Scheffler up against DeChambeau and Koepka. Mark Larkham from Supercars. You know this guy if you love your supercars. He's absolutely brilliant. He's the guy that tells us everything that is going on in the pits, on the track, with the cars and everything else. Good catch up with Larko before Christmas. And let's talk sport. Mark Watson and Matt Gunn, both with us. And looking back at their highlights of the year, plus the cricket from here and there. That's our series against England. And the Aussies thrashing India at the moment. Again, a Christmas wish from this side of the microphone. If you like what you're listening to and what you're looking at, then please hit subscribe for us, the DSPN YouTube channel. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell your friends about us. We're trying for 5,000 YouTube subscribers before Christmas. That would be absolutely terrific if we can do that. And if you have already, thank you so much for your help. We begin the show same way every day.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
Now, this one is just weird, plain weird. And the only question I've got is why? To primate or not to primate? That is the awkward and very unfortunate question that Isha Guha, the English-born cricket analyst and commentator, has had to ask herself after landing in, it seems, very hot water for using that P word in reference to the Indian pace bowler Jasprit Bumrah during this current Brisbane Test. Isha, who herself is of Indian origin, was talking about Jasprit as the potential series MVP. And instead of saying, as most of us would, most valuable player or most valuable person, she said, most valuable primate. Why? I don't know. I mean, as a broadcaster, I think sometimes you're trying to search for a new way to say something, just a different word. Hey, us humans are primates, okay? Let's just establish that. But obviously, it's a really uncomfortable thing to say at best, and apparently kicked off a right brouhaha, resulting in yesterday's very sincere and equally tortured public apology with Ravi Shastri standing alongside her before play started on day 3 in Brisbane. Why is this such a kerfuffle? Because primate as a word was deemed grossly offensive. To who? Well, a whole lot of anonymous Twitter hacks for a start, that's who. Did Bumrah himself take offence? That we don't know. But anyway, that's not how it works these days. The immediacy of her apology was clearly about ending this thing and quelling the social media uproar before it became a hell of a lot bigger than it never should have. So was use of the word primate actually offensive, even if it was never intended to offend? Well, that's for you and you alone to decide. If you find it offensive, you find it offensive. Me, I'm neither offended by it nor offended on behalf of anyone else who might be offended, who I don't know or have never asked, because again, that's how it works these days, isn't it? Someone on social media reacts, the mainstream media newsrooms just seize the opportunity for instant clickbait, and here comes the hurricane force. It's offensive, sack her, apologise, she's a racist. Blah, blah, blah. Of course she's not racist, neither was the comment, nor was it ever intended to be. To me, it was just a very unfortunate choice of a word from a broadcaster who was just trying to think of something and really did cock that one up. More of a big nothing than a big deal? Well, I don't know. That's for you to decide. And I think however you do decide says a hell of a lot about you. Whereas what she did doesn't actually say, for me, anything about her. As I said, it's just how it works these days.
Devlin.
It is always a treat. It's a real pleasure to have Ryan Fox on the program, and especially when he's given us some time today ahead of a tournament that bears his own name. You know you've made it when you play the Ryan Fox Invitational, and you are Ryan Fox. You don't need an invitation.
Well, yeah, it's kind of nice. Just turn up and have a whack round Royal Auckland, which is somewhere I've been a member for 20-something years, and set the golf course up nice and tough for us today. Got some nice weather, though, up here in Auckland, so I can't complain too much, and yeah, just nice to have a few people out there and hopefully enjoy the golf course.
So after a huge year, a long, exhausting year, draining year and everything else, is this how you relax or is this part of the business?
This is probably part of the business side of it, to be fair. I've got a little bit of golf with my mates coming up, which I enjoy. I've had a lot of golf days in the last sort of 3 weeks or so, and that's just kind of all part of it, golf's one of those great games in that respect where you can get up close and personal. You know, it's not like, oh, let's go have a game with the All Blacks. That just doesn't work, does it? But it's pretty easy to go and have a game of golf. So there's a fair bit of that to do, but I've had a nice break before that. So I'm refreshed and ready for next year already.
Did you beat Rory McIlroy last week?
We won the 4-ball, which was nice.
Nice.
Beat him and Jimmy Dunn, which apparently they don't lose very often. So that was a nice scalp to get. And I've probably got him by a couple off the stick, but we certainly didn't have an individual match. We're just worried about the 4-ball, and I birdied the last 3 holes. Won 16-17 to win 3 and 1 in the 4-ball. So yeah, I was pretty chuffed with that. And man, they really enjoyed it up here, which was great, or down here, should I say. Yeah, he said the golf course was, he had high expectations for it, and it exceeded all those expectations, which is pretty cool to hear. And if anyone saw him on social media, he raved about the golf course, which is, I think he did Tourism New Zealand's job there pretty well, to be honest.
So before we get on to the year that you've had and so forth, just one more question about that. And it's just like, so, you know, can you relax and have a round of golf with him, or is it always going to be bitterly competitive with a guy like that? Because I imagine if you get on a course with somebody like that, you want to win. Both of you want to win.
Yes and no. I mean, look, there was no one out watching. It was nice and quiet. It was really easy. I played with him a bunch. It was definitely the most relaxed round of golf I've had with him. And he's down here with a few mates, and it was just, he wanted to see the golf course. And yeah, look, it was pretty chilled out. You know, we wanted to win the 4-ball. No one was worried about what we shot, but we definitely wanted to win the 4-ball match. It was me and Jim Rawstaff, who is one of the founders at Tariti and Tiari. So I played a lot of golf with Jim, and played a bit of golf with Jimmy Dunn, and Rory and Jimmy play a lot together. So yeah, it was a big one to get their scalp, and we both sides didn't want to lose that. But in terms of me v Rory, there wasn't really anything there. It was just walk around, have a chat, and try to help our partners out a little bit.
Last year, Ryan, we were at the World Cup final together, and you know I was just buzzing and talking to you about Wentworth. I could talk to you about it all day, and so that was the highlight of your year last year. So how do you compare this year with that year? Is it better, worse, or how do you describe it?
I mean, it's definitely worse in terms of results. But the number one goal was ticked off for the year. That was keeping a card on the PGA Tour. It had its struggles in there. Traveling with the family was probably a lot tougher than we all realised. Spent 37 weeks living out of a suitcase this year, which is longer than I've done in a long, long time. And then sort of had a bit of an injury in the middle of the year, which took me a while to work out. It was actually an injury to start, and then took a little bit to fix in the end. And it was pretty frustrating. Certainly didn't reach the highs of 22 or 23, but I didn't shoot myself in the foot. I've still got my job for next year on the PGA Tour. I've got the experience of knowing all the courses, knowing how all the travel works. So it certainly wasn't a failure by any stretch, but I just never managed to put 4 rounds together in a tournament, really. I played the majors well enough, pretty consistently. I had some almost decent weeks on the PGA Tour, a couple of top 5s. Was leading Canada going into the weekend and finished top 10 there. So there was definitely some positives, but I never really put it all together. And I've been working hard the last few weeks to make sure injury-wise I'm good for next year, and refreshed and ready to go for 2025, and hoping, can take a few learnings from this year and really kick on for next year.
You've learnt to take a few learnings. I love it. Okay, so, but just in terms of
I know it's a cliche, but yeah.
I know. We all understand, mate. Look, in terms of the hip, though, so that was something that was fixable, and or is it an injury that you have to maintain?
It's more than maintain one. Potentially it is fixable, but will require surgery, and that's sort of a 6-month rehab to get back to tour level. And I don't want to do that if I don't have to.
Sure.
And I don't have pain in the hip. It's just I had a lot of dysfunction in it through the middle of the year, and that was kind of why I didn't think I was injured. I just thought I was playing bad, to be honest. And really struggling to do things in my golf swing that I've done naturally for a long time. And as soon as I got a cortisone shot at the end of the year, when the inflammation died down, and all of a sudden my golf swing came back pretty quickly. So
fantastic.
just got to manage it going forward. There's going to be a potential of surgery on the horizon at some stage, but there is also, I could play to the end of my career whenever that is and not really have any issues if it's managed well. It's just kind of depends on if it blows up or not, basically.
So let's just go back to those majors because, I mean, look, I think, what is it, 10 or 12 in a row that you've made, the cut, which is, there's only 4 or 5 of you that have actually done that. So that's a huge tick as well. And you did play well at various times during all of those tournaments. And so, that must be lurking in the mind as well. Again, because we've talked about this a lot. It's just about somehow bringing your best game and doing it for 4 days over one of those. But that's the time you have to do it as well. So the fact that you actually can play your best golf at those times.
Yeah, look, if I went through the majors this year, the Masters was, I led the Masters for an hour there on Thursday. I hit the I bounced out of the hole on 17 on Friday and I was running top 10 for the day and I rolled it back into a bunker, made triple, and then finished 30 something. So, yeah, I bounced the ball the other way. That might have been a slightly different week. I played pretty well at the Open for the most part, played really well in the last round, and then sort of the PGA and the US Open. I played well in a stretch to kind of make the cut, and that was kind of about it. But, to play that well consistently in those big events is a good thing. They're the hardest cuts to make. They're the strongest field. So I know it's there. I just couldn't seem to put it together. Even in them, if you looked at my scores, I had a couple of decent rounds, and then it was a bit of a struggle and 2 others. And, that was kind of the recurring theme of the whole year. So I know my game's good enough. I've just got to make sure it's there consistently more often than it was this year. I keep wanting to say last year, but it's still this year.
Yeah, still this year. Look, we're obviously both cricket fans, and we're watching this Test series as well. I'm just going to draw the parallel because the cricketers always say that their sport is about failure. You measure yourself in failure, and I think golf's a bit like that as well, isn't it? Because just listening to you, like all the highs that looking from outside in. I mean, I think us fans have a totally different impression of it than you do.
Yeah, look, I think golf's a funny one. You go through a Hall of Fame golf career as 8 PGA Tour wins and a cup, maybe 1 major, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of misses, mate. That's a hell of a lot.
That's guys that have played 400 to 500 events.
Yep.
And I think you look at guys like Tiger and now Scotty Scheffler's starting to do it over a much shorter period. But, winning a quarter of your starts certainly hasn't been something that happens very often in golf. And so you've got to try to take wins out of not a win, if that makes sense. You've got to find the positives in other results. And again, I can look back at this year, the majors or them, getting myself in contention a couple of times on the PGA Tour, keeping my card, all of those are really positive things. But if you look at the scores and some of that, there's definitely some stuff I need to get better at. Obviously, there wasn't a win in the win column. There wasn't a whole lot of top 10s compared to previous years, but it was still, I can still look back and say there was a whole lot of good stuff that happened this year. It's just a hard game to find statistically to find the positives out of sometimes. You could have a great career on the PGA Tour. You could play there 15 years and literally not win, and you'd be perceived as a good golfer, but statistically looking back on it, you'd be like, oh, you never won. That's kind of weird. And as you said, cricket's kind of like that with I imagine batting and bowling a little bit the same. There's a bit of luck involved. You can feel like you batted pretty well and get 30 and get out to an absolute brilliant delivery.
Ball there.
Yeah,
exactly,
and you go, well, what can I do? I'm hitting it good. Fair enough. I just got done. That happens in golf plenty of times. You come down the stretch, you play, you control everything. You can control pretty well, and someone just plays better than you. It happens.
A couple of names I want to throw at you, and we'll let you go in a few minutes. Stephen Elker has had another brilliant year. He's just such a good dude, isn't he? And also Ben Campbell. Now, I didn't know this name, and Telf introduced it to us last week. Good on him. Who's going great guns on the Asian tour.
Yeah, look, what Steve's done the last 3 years has just been, 3 or 4 years has just been unbelievable, to be honest. Look, he probably went under the radar here because he was in America for so long, but, he had a PGA Tour card on, I think, 2 or 3 separate occasions. He won a bunch of times on what's now the Corn Ferry Tour. He was a really good player for a really long time, just never kind of completely cracked it, and then all of a sudden turned 50 and started beating these legends of the game. And long may it continue for him. It's great to see. He's such a nice dude, and he's going out and as I said, beating the legends of the game and
winning tournaments, mate. Yeah,
pretty comfortably for the most part. It's down the stretch he hits a lot of good shots. He looks like he's been doing it for a whole career, and he's only kind of been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years. It's pretty crazy, and I hope he continues to do it. It's pretty cool for New Zealand golf, and it's just a great story in general for the world of golf. And BC was Ben Campbell was part of our Eisenhower team when I played in 2010, and he had a pretty torrid run, to be fair, after he turned pro. I think he turned pro a year or so after me, and it seemed to be injury after injury after injury. And I think for a stage there, he was sort of not looking like having any status anywhere. And now he's fit and healthy, and he's going great guns the last couple of years. Now he took Cam Smith down a couple of years ago at the Hong Kong, or last year at the Hong Kong Open down the stretch. And Cam's got some pedigree of winning golf tournaments, and to do that's pretty impressive. And he's backed it up massively this year. He's probably unlucky to miss out on that live spot. I know that it would have been pretty lucrative to get that, but regardless, those international series on the Asian Tour, that there's some decent purses there, and it's great to see him get there finally. It's been a tough road for him, and he was, I think he got to as high as 4 in the world as an amateur, so he was always regarded as a really, really good player. And just probably 10 years of being really unlucky with stuff. He'd get something right and something else would pop up, and fair play to keep working through it and get to the stage he's at now. He's starting to become a proper name in the world of golf now, and he's good enough to compete anywhere, and I hope he gets some chances in some majors and stuff going forward to show how good he really is.
2 quick questions. We'll let you go. Okay, so who have you got? Rory and Scheffler against the 2 live golf guys who have won majors while they're playing live, and that is Koepka and DeChambeau. Look, these things, he's kind of made for TV cash grabs. I normally just look the other way. But this one actually does have some interest because you got 2 fantastic players going up against 2 fantastic players. I'm not so sure it's a big live golf PGA thing between these 2 guys, but you'll know more than most about that.
Yeah, look, I chatted to Rory about this actually last week, and it is a little bit of a hit and giggle money grab kind of thing. There's still some pride for those guys. Like, they still want to win. Yeah. And I think, both sides probably understand that the media are going to make a far bigger deal out of it than what the players do. So there's a little bit on them in that regard. Like, obviously Rory and Scotty are pretty damn good players, and Bryson and Brooks are pretty damn good players. And they've got a funny format too. It's like 6 holes of foursome, 6 holes of four ball, and there's 6 holes of individual. So there's like 4 points up for grabs. So it's, when we played 6 holes on Friday and chasing the Fox, and 6 holes isn't a whole lot to play a match in. You do one thing bad and you lose. So it's probably not a fair reflection of where they stand in regards to each other, but it'll be a cool spectacle, and playing under lights is a little bit weird as well. But I think both sides will definitely have some pride in the result if they can. The media will definitely tout it as live versus PGA Tour, and even though the guys probably don't see it that way, they still want to win.
It is always such a pleasure catching up with you. I thank you again for being so generous with your time. You know that you've got so much support here. People love following your career and following you in every tournament. And making that PGA Tour again and getting that card, that is a hell of an achievement in itself. I know that you know this, and don't ever, anyone underwrite exactly what that means, because that's the best 100 or so golfers in the world playing on that tour, minus a few on the live tour. But just to fight and get that, man, I mean, you've banked that. That's a hell of a thing to have for next year. Congratulations.
So it was the main one I wanted to tick off. There was a few others that I missed, but that was definitely the one I wanted, and I'm glad to have done it pretty comfortably in the end. I know the number probably looks a little closer to 125 than it was, but I took some time to rehab the hip and knew I'd kept my card with a few events to spare. So it was nice, and I really appreciate the support from you and from everyone back home. It's you definitely feel it overseas. Always a few random Kiwis pop up at events, up the Wahs or something sort of comes out in the crowd, which is pretty cool. And I enjoy representing New Zealand on the world stage, and hopefully I can do it for a little bit longer.
The Tight Five.
5 separate sporting topics, Lachlan. Roughly a minute, maybe 90 seconds on each. And when the bell reminds us, dings onto the next topic. We go in no particular order. Talking today's big sports stories. LIV versus PGA. The big cash grab. Golf match made for TV event in Vegas tomorrow. Do you care? Black Caps consolation prize third test. But we're absolutely dick in England. Where was this in the first 2 tests? Let's talk about Kane Williamson, though. His 33rd test century. Ezra Mam gets off pretty damn easy for those drunk drug driving charges in Australia. NBA The Cup. Do you care about this? Even though your Lakers won it last year, do you care about it this year? Patrick Mahomes has got a high ankle sprain. What does that mean for the Chiefs in the NFL? Let's start with the cricket, though. Beautiful fine day in Hamilton. Again, look, we aren't live at the time, so we may have actually won this test match by the time you get to listen or watch this podcast, setting them a just ridiculously large run chase. Kane Williamson's 33rd century yesterday. Now, get this. Listen closely. Among 143 test players to score more than 10 test centuries, only 6 have scored them more quickly than a century every 6 innings. And Kane Williamson.
Okay, that's word salad.
Okay, so every 6 innings you've got to score a century.
Right.
Now, the only players ever to do that include Sutcliffe, Walcott. These are legendary names in cricket. Don Bradman. He scored one every 2.76 innings. Williamson, 5.6.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Any list, any time, anywhere in Test cricket where your name is alongside Don Bradman's says you've done something extraordinary. It's like NBA basketball, isn't it? Every time you get your name alongside Wilt the Stilt or LeBron or one of those guys, or Michael Jordan, you are
the greatest.
You are
Thank you.
Yeah, I think he is the greatest anyway. So congratulations to Kane Williamson. That to me is the big talking point. Look, I don't want to be disappointed in the fact we're going to win this third test, but it feels a bit like a consolation prize to me. It feels a bit like, you score a goal when you're 3-0 down in the 98th minute. You know what I mean? Just feels a bit like that.
I think it's got a little bit more meaning than that, but I see what you mean, and I totally agree. I don't care. I'm not the biggest cricket nut, and it took me a while to really get into the sport, and so I'm still learning every day. But I apply mentality of other sports to that, and it's like that, or it's like your favourite player in the All Blacks jumper scoring a couple of tries at the end of a test, but they've already lost it, so it doesn't matter. I just don't care.
Yeah, okay.
The fact that we're winning this, the margin doesn't mean anything to me, because as far as I'm concerned, England don't care about this anywhere near as much as one of the first 2 tests, because they've already won the series.
And we also played so terribly in those.
And also
first
with
2
Kane,
tests.
can I be the devil's advocate, which I like to be a lot on this segment, and I think it rubs people the wrong way. Kane Williamson is spectacular. Don't get me wrong. The numbers, he's our greatest Test batsman across all formats probably as well. The numbers certainly say it. Based on talent, that's up for debate. I know you always bring up Martin Crowe.
Always.
He's never had a century in Australia, right?
No.
And I don't has he got one against them full stop? I don't think he has.
No.
Now that for me is kind of almost a mini asterisk when you're comparing him to some of the greats of the modern era, for example. Yeah. And I don't have all the numbers. That's one that I do have, and someone can certainly apply a bit more to it. But it's kind of like...
Okay, cool. Yeah, scoring test centuries against their major opponents, especially at their place and all of that. Yeah, I don't think it takes anything away from his career, but it is a good point. I mean, you do have to write that down amongst all the stats as well. LIV versus PGA. Now, these events ordinarily I just can't be asked, okay? This was like Tiger and Phil, but this one actually does carry a little bit more because these guys are the 4 best players in golf, Rory and Scheffler up against DeChambeau and Koepka.
Are they the 4 best?
Well, the 2 best on the Live Golf Tour. Yeah, okay, you could argue whether Rory, he's the biggest, one of the biggest names anyway.
It's 4 of the biggest names.
4 of the biggest names.
There we go.
I mean, the only thing is after listening to Ryan Fox describe it, that it's 6 holes of this, 6 of that, 6 of that. Okay, it is a bit silly, isn't it? I wish these guys were playing off, I don't know, for something as significant as a major. You imagine those 4 tied at the top on the 4th day going into, the Masters or whoever. That would be as big a TV audience as you get for any sport anywhere in the world watching that. But does this excite you?
No, because it's one of these sort of gimmicky made for TV kind of things. It's like the NBA All-Star Weekend. Like, it's fun. Oh, I might tune in, but I don't really care.
Well,
can't
at the end
sport
of the day.
Just
be silly old dumb old fun every now and again?
No, I'm too competitive as a fan. I invest too much.
Would you pay to watch this?
Would I go to it live, like if I was in Vegas?
Well, if we're invited to a corporate tent, we'd be there on the 17th necking it,
I'll
wouldn't
tell
we?
you what, if I was on a roadie around the US and this was on, I'd make a detour to go to it.
Well, you get
I'd-
to see these guys up close.
I don't think I'd pay money on TV to watch it. No, probably not.
All right, then. Next topic has got to be Ezra Mam. $850 fine for drunk and drugged driving without a license. Look,
Was he drunk as well, or was he just drugged?
well,
They described it as a cocktail of cocaine in his system. That's how it's been described.
okay,
in the
well,
media.
whatever it is, he shouldn't have been driving because he didn't have a license anyway. He's got that in his system. Now, remember, this is the guy that the Broncos sent onto a building site to try and get some reality into his life and saying this is how the other half live. This is a bit like Sevu Reece just getting another discharge, without...
That one's worse, probably.
Well, Sevu Reece had the domestic violence and then smashing someone else's car, gets both those. You can't tell me that if this guy was Andy McDonald from Brisbane, same charges, that he would be, because it's Ezra Mam, Brisbane Bronco, he gets treated differently.
Of course.
You can't convince me any other which way.
Of course.
And
It's
is it-
absolutely the case. But it's the case with every single sporting athlete whenever they get in trouble.
Well, it's
with the
wrong,
law.
is what
it's
it
very
is.
wrong. Oh, no, he should be tried as you or I would be.
Yeah, as a commoner.
It's totally wrong. Now, I don't know how true this is. I don't know the Australian road rules or laws
Well,
too
they're
well.
probably the same
but-
as everywhere else.
But in Australia, if you get caught with your phone, using your phone while driving, I saw this on Twitter, that you get a $1,200 fine. Well, hold up. He smashed into someone. He injured a young girl.
That's what he did, yeah.
He had cocaine in his system with a few other drugs by the sounds of things. And he
was
shouldn't
off-
have
he
been
was-
driving.
He was off trying to find a phone charger. That's the NRL excuse these days,
But
isn't it?
he gets $850 and a 6-month
weak.
suspended
It's
license.
just weak,
It
isn't
doesn't
it?
make sense.
Should because of his profile he get hammered more?
Now, I'll say one thing. I don't know what there's a move to be made by the NRL / the Broncos around a suspension. I'd be shocked. Like, the NRL will probably hand one down. If it's tiny and small, like 8 to
It'll
10
be a
weeks or something.
suspended suspension. You watch though.
Well, no, they can't. No, they genuinely can't. I don't think the NRL are this idiotic. The Papua New Guinea thing, they clearly are. But, Marcelo Montoya got 4 weeks for a homophobic slur, supposedly a homophobic slur on field. Spencer Leniu got 8 weeks, was
8
it,
weeks,
for calling Ezra Mam, the guy we're talking about, a certain word last year, a racist
primate.
term. Yeah. So, if he doesn't get at least half a season, then there's got to be some sort of investigation into the NRL.
I agree
But I
with
actually genuinely, I'm a Broncos fan, so I'm a bit biased. Now, I want Ezra Mam to get the full arm of the law. I don't want him on my team because what he's done is wrong. However, I think Brisbane fans can agree with this, that there is a bit of a change, or they're trying to change the culture at that club. So I'd be
Trying
shocked
to.
if the CEO, because Madge Maguire's a bit of an old school hard ass kind of coach.
Let's hope so.
He mixed in with a CEO who oversaw the Storm, so he's been a successful CEO. I'd be shocked if they don't hand
but to
their
me-
own sort of suspension to Ezra Mam.
Sure, but the Brisbane Broncos shouldn't have to be dishing out judicial
No, they should. No, the
punishments.
NRL
court should bloody do it.
Well,
for a
yeah,
start.
but in terms of the suspension, the NRL should be doing it, and I hope they
the
do.
NBA Cup.
No,
The
move
Bucks
on.
versus OKC.
Your
Last
Bucks,
year,
your Bucks.
Lakers. My Bucks last year, your Lakers
You got a
won
new
this.
team every week.
Yeah, but, well, I just kind of like the sport. I don't really have an NBA team. But I think that these competitions are now to the detriment of the NBA regular season, which has just turned farcical. And I was moaning about this last year when there was big stories about this guy had got 70 points and that guy had got 80. It's just
Yeah, within about 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 guys had about 70
padding,
points.
resting players. No one cares about the 82-game season anymore, do they? They just, as long as your players are fit in time for the playoffs or your time you run to get a play-in spot in the playoffs.
Well, there was always a
It's
default.
just a silly distraction, this tournament is.
Well, yeah, there was always a default belief. By the way, you love your baseball. If you're going to criticise the length of the NBA regular season,
that's true.
you have to criticise Major League Baseball's
They could chop
regular
100
season.
games off that.
They
easily,
could.
yeah.
Well, the NBA should as well. They need to reduce it to 60 or 70 games. But they need to get rid of the NBA. They're not going to do it. Obviously,
they're
they
not.
just brought it in. But they need to get rid of the NBA
But,
Cup. They
you
need to
know-
get rid of the play-in tournament as
But
well.
Lachlan, no, so many of these sports are doing it. Look, we see it with FIFA and the World Club Champs next year and elongating the Champions League and everything else. It just seems to me like the lemon has been squeezed so much. The great thing about the NFL, which is what I love, is less is more. You get 17 regular season games, you get the playoffs, the season goes for 4 or 5 months, and you spend the next 7 months waiting for the next season, don't you? How many other sports are going the other way, where they're just dumping so much crap and irrelevant so-called competitive stuff?
Well, World Rugby's doing
World
it. They're trying
Rugby-
to bring in this de facto World Cup that happens every other 2 years, you know. So every sport's doing it. You're right. You know, Formula One have now
Doesn't mean it makes it better.
No, Formula One have 3 Grand Prix in the US now. About 2 or 3 years ago, they only had 1. You know, there's about 4 of them in the Middle East. There's about 25 or 6 races on the calendar. There used to be only about 18. It's happening with every single sport.
Patrick Mahomes, a high ankle sprain. These are nasty injuries. This happened yesterday, and this could change the way that the NFL season plays out from here. If he's not the Chiefs quarterback, they aren't winning it.
You know who their backup is?
Well, let's
Carson Wentz. Who
Wentz.
screwed both our franchises.
Yeah, he did, yeah. I mean, he had a great season once for the Eagles, and then he got
an
injured.
ACL injury and then had a head knock a couple of years later and it's never been the same.
This is really significant, so watch the space. But we're going to just close on because, we're also asking Watto and Gunny about this. To primate or not to primate? Now, if you Google, are human beings primate? The answer is yes, we're all primates. Isha Guha, who we've interviewed on the show, lovely, lovely person, and obviously doesn't really have a bad bone in her body, I wouldn't think. But
we assume, we don't know her personally.
Don't know, but what a weird thing to say. I just find this kind of thing just so strange. Like somebody said something like that, and as soon as she said it, somebody else in the commentary box probably looked and what? Oh, she's just trying to find a word or find another expression. It's just a really unfortunate choice of words. I don't think it's any more than that.
No, I don't think it's any malice, but it's just such a strange thing.
But does she have to publicly apologise?
Yes, you absolutely. Okay. I'm sorry,
right.
absolutely.
See, I mean, now, for me, it's just...
Well, no. Okay. This is a bit amusing, is the first word that comes to mind, because this is 2 white men talking about this. Now, you can't escape from the fact that regardless of her intention and regardless of who she is ethnically, that she is called a man of colour, the word primate. Now,
I get that.
That is wrong. You can't do that.
Of course.
But on the other side of that, I don't think she meant anything wrong by it. I don't think she thought in her head, I'm going to use this term, watch me have this great soliloquy while live on air, and then it backfired. I just think it just came out of her mouth and she didn't realise what she was doing. But at the same time, I would think that she's got enough nous as a broadcaster not to be faced with such a situation mentally before she's saying it. Like, why would that word... But why does that word pop into your head?
Because, I mean, she's just thinking out loud while she's doing it. Most valuable person, most valuable person.
But have you ever just randomly said the word primate to describe another person?
No,
this is the thing.
No.
I haven't either.
No. It's weird, isn't it?
It's a really strange one. She's not a racist.
No.
She's not a bad person. And I like that Ravi Shastri actually said good on her for apologising, line of the sea. Let's just move on.
Is that it? Is it we
absolutely.
move on?
I hope so. I hope so. But at the same time,
don't do it, children.
Don't say that word.
DSPN.
V8's mate, Supercars. He's a great mate of the show. He's so generous with his time. I know that I'm going to pump your tyres up, Larko, but you're the best at it, mate. You're one of the, I watch a hell of a lot of sport, and the guy doing the sideline adds so much to the coverage, and I keep telling you, you're absolutely brilliant at it. We always appreciate your time, and we're wrapping up a long season of Supercars. Welcome back, mate.
Thanks, Marty. Always like having a chat, mate. You know that you're a great supporter of our sport, and the Kiwis are our friends, mate. I say to everyone. In fact, I said it several times at Adelaide. I always bump into Kiwis. There's always a lot at every event, and I say per capita, you reckon we love our motorsport, our V8s? You love it more. You really do.
Well, you saw it. Yeah, you saw it at Taupo Motorsport Park. I mean,
yep.
You bring the event to New Zealand, and motorsport fans just absolutely love it.
Well, that was probably right up there with the highlights of the year, mate. That was just such a cool event. And the thing that is not lost on me, on Saturday there, I think it was Saturday afternoon, pouring rain, and I looked up in those grandstands, and seriously, mate, there wasn't a Kiwi fan that had departed. That was how it was. And, what a cool event that was. What a cool little track.
So, overall, when we look back at the season, the right guy won it, Will Brown?
Yeah, I think so. Look, if I'm honest, if either of those boys won it, the right guy won it. But it was interesting, wasn't it? I just think we saw a lot. You learn a lot just watching 2 compete just like that. Feeney is a clearly incredibly talented young man, and I say the word young. So his time's coming. I'm not at all surprised about Will Brown. Just a quick story. I was talking to his dad on Sunday night. I had and not because of anything I did, but I had a sit down with him probably in, I don't know, Martin, might have been 2014 or 15. He was only a junior burger.
That's 10 years ago.
And his dad just asked me, we're out at Queensland Raceway. He said, what does he what's he doing? The three of us had to sit down. I said, look, whatever you do, you've got to do Formula Ford. They've got a gear stick and they've got a clutch, and you can adjust the car and you learn all that stuff about the car. But whatever you do, and this is the mistake a lot of parents make, they go for the trophy hunt. I said, don't go for the trophy hunt. Go the long way around, whatever that takes to do the learning. Because when you get the call up, all that learning is going to matter. And I now watching Will Brown. So he went off and he did Formula Ford. He did Toyota 86. He did Formula 4. He did a whole bunch of stuff. He did the learning.
Yep.
And when his time came, and he's a pilot, he's a highly intelligent young bloke. Wow. You can see that.
Yep.
But he's got a little bit of, well, I won't say it here. I'll call it cunning. He's got a little bit of cunning in him.
Yep.
And I think that's served him well because, when you get two drivers like that in the same garage, you've got to try and shift that momentum to your side of the garage. So there's been a bit of an internal contest, and I've personally on the pit lane really enjoyed this year watching that inside the garage and also the engineers, Andrew Edwards and Marty Short, and how all that dynamic works. They're all good mates, but wow, they've got to compete against each other.
Yeah, you describe it so beautifully when it's on race day. It is just the minutiae, isn't it? I hope I said that word right. I always get it confused, but it's just the tiniest little things, the tiniest little details, and it's not like everyone doesn't know. So what puts one car, one driver, one mark ahead of the next for you?
Well, here's the whole issue with, well, when I say issue, this is a very much, this point that you make, Martin, is just become highlighted with Gen 3. When you make cars that are all the same, which is a good thing, we have to do that for cost and stop everyone going off and re-engineering rockets all the time and spending millions of dollars doing it. So that's all been a good thing. But the cars now, whilst they have plenty of adjustability, what's happened is the window to get that adjustability bang on has become, instead of being this big, it's now smaller.
Yep.
So you've got less downforce, less adjustment. So the window is smaller and you've only got to be a fraction out of it and you're outside the window. And that might be only 2 or 3 tenths of a second, but you're out of the game. So I've spoken to a lot of teams and drivers and engineers this year that have said exactly that. It's hard to get in the window, and probably more so when you're not in it. It's just, you don't just fall out of it, but you fall out for a chunk. And why that's an important point is I keep doing on my Pinot Hub screen this year, probably said we do a thing called the championship trajectory, where I like to look at how someone's got to where they've got. And I see more than ever, and I don't mean the Red Bull guys, because this goes to your point, is Chaz Mostert, great example, Matty Payne example. Guys that can get on a podium or win a race can also finish 16th and 17th. So everyone's trajectory starts, it's looking more like this. They can win, then they're nowhere, then they win, then they're nowhere. The difference in the Red Bull camp is just the consistency, the ability, and this is nothing new for them. They've been doing it for years. Their ability to roll their car out of the truck, and if it's not in the window in Friday practice, by God, it's always in the window come Sunday. And that is something that every team in the pit lane would like to be able to put their finger on, have the methodology and the process that team does, but they don't. I mean, it's just a reality, and it's validated, Martin, by the fact that, you go back to Craig Lowndes, Jamie Whincup, Shane Van Gisbergen, and now they've got 2 young blokes in there, 2 new young blokes, a new team owner, and they're still winning the championship. Mm-hmm. And the culture in that place, a lot of my ex-employees, or not a lot, there's several of my ex-employees still in there. And I'm very close to the team and I talk to them a lot. And just in those casual conversations, the psychology in that team, the winning psychology, the preemptive type thinking that they do is what stands them out from the rest of the field. And it doesn't matter what new rule, what new regs, what new car, what new safety car rule comes out, you can almost guarantee they'll be bang ahead of the game first. It's a cultural thing that's still, and well done to Jamie Whincup. When Roland Daines left, he still kept that culture there.
Are the personalities there again? I mean, you've dropped in 5 or 6 names already, and, we go from losing absolute superstars of the sport, and it's like any sport, isn't it? All of a sudden you don't have Christian Cullen, you don't have the beloved Joni, you don't have these guys. Can the next generation still excite the fans? Do you feel that that's there?
It's a funny one, isn't it? Yes, I do, because I think there's a good young crop of blokes come through. And I'll tell you, who I put at the top of the pile of personalities? Ryan Wood.
Go
I
on.
love
Go on,
Ryan
Kiwi,
Wood.
go on.
Mate, no, I mean it. I mean, and he knows it, mate. I tell him every day. He's got, because he's fast, he's young. Yes, he needs just to be tempered a little bit and just pointed in the right direction. But he's got the thing that we all want. It's hard to find, which he's got speed. So if the team can knock a few things into shape, but wow, he's got some spunk. You know, he's a fun guy. He's great to be around. He's serious when he needs to be. So's Will Brown. Will Brown's a fun, laughing guy. Serious when he needs to. So we've actually got a good crop of young guys. But Scafie and I often joke, one thing that does disturb me about a lot of them, not all of them, daughter, but a lot of them do, these blokes all hang out on a Saturday morning together and go riding and having coffee and
You weren't doing that back in your day, were you? No.
That's bullshit, mate. We just don't agree with that stuff. You know, you want to have a bit of rough and tumble on the track. Well, mate, I remember I nearly had fisticuffs with Russell Ingall several times in my career. I just hated the guy.
Yeah.
Didn't mean I didn't respect him or whatever, but that's just how it was. Larry Perkins and I had lots of comings together on the track, and there was a real distaste for each other, which helped fester the, I don't care. I'm going to run into your bumper and take you out. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see a little bit of that mongrel back in there again.
Is there enough races in the calendar, and is there enough variety in the circuits and the tracks for you?
Certainly enough variety in the tracks. That's without doubt. I mean, we've got fast flowing ones. We're going back to the Bend this year. Then we got I like short, tight, awkward tracks. You know, street circuit's great, Taupo's great. Those sorts of things really suit our cars. You know, when you got full of fuel, we're about 1.5 tons, right? So the more you have to slow our car down to take a tight corner and then speed it up and then slow it down again.
Yeah.
The racing is always better.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I loved Adelaide at the end. What was it, Corner 8 or something like that? Everyone's coming to guts on it, you know, so yeah.
What a great place to have our grand final every year, right?
Yeah, perfect,
we've got more races next year in terms of there's another event and there's more races overall. But, you know, I know where you go, Martin. Probably we're all a little bit, you know, football. It's every week. No one asks when's the next footy game on, and everyone does ask me all the time, when's the next race? Because we're sort of 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be. The problem we've got is, you know, NASCAR had the ability to have 30-something races a year, but look at their budgets.
Yeah.
All right, so we would be entirely capable of racing every second weekend, but the money that would require to come into the sport, because you're going to need multiple cars. Plus, we travel to Perth, and then you'd have to turn another car around and ship it out the door a week later.
Right, yeah.
So, and look, part of Gen 3 was to build a simpler car with literally a truck full of all the same spares. So we're getting to that point. So I think over time you will see it ramp up bit by bit by bit.
So me being you, so when you're there and you've got all those screens and you've got all those toys and you've got everything there, what's your favourite bit of it? Because I've got my favourite bit of you. What's your favourite bit of all of that new technology that you've got to explain to us?
Oh, wow, I've never been asked that question, Martin. That's a good question. You know what I really like doing? In fact, we did one, you're testing my memory now, we did one because everything just morphs into one big long race of 35 years now, but was that Adelaide, was it Saturday? No, it might have been at the Gold Coast. Okay, anyway, I love doing the reactive ones. I like doing the ones in a race where something happens, right? There's contact. Someone does something weird, something does once, and we have the ability, because we're talking to the production truck. So, bang, we get him to snip off a bit of footage. It comes down to my graphics guy. I get him to trim it off there and there. I say, give me a timeline thing so I can slow-mo it or do him a little slider. And he builds all that in about 35, 40 seconds or a minute.
That's brilliant, mate. That's brilliant.
Bang, shove it in the screen, and then you can go straight in after the fact and show people at home in slow-mo, right, here's what the rule is, here's what they did, that's why the penalty. I enjoy those ones. Reactive, we call those.
Why am I doing this? Why am I letting myself go through this?
Talk Sport.
Martin Devlin and two fellow primates, Mark Watson, and let's be positive with Matt Gunn out of Twizel. Let's get that word up and out of the way straight away so we don't have to deal with it anymore. Human beings are primates. I'm accusing you of being one, Gunn, and you of being one, Watson.
Oh, very attractive primate.
Cancel the both of you and cancel me for saying the word.
Yeah, hello to my fellow primates. It's lovely to be here, Martin Devlin.
Hands up, definitely a primate and a prime specimen of primateness as well, I would say.
Hey, Matt, I hope you're going to be a lot more positive this week than you were last week.
Yeah, look, what I watched the broadcast back last week. I just want to apologise. It seems like Martin and I were picking on you a little bit there for a moment, so I take all that back. And as we head into the Christmas break, season's greetings, and I apologise.
Oh, look, mate, I have been married for 17 years. I'm used to neglect, Matt. Can I say that?
Well,
Am I going to get cancelled for saying that? Am I going to get cancelled for saying that?
You should be good. Let's talk about Isha to start with, though. And look, I've it's been a big topic on the podcast today, as you'd expect. I mean, this is the world we live in now. I just wonder what the hell she was thinking. Why would you do a lot of live broadcasting, and when we're doing live sports calls, you've done it as well, Matt, a fair bit yourself. You did the basketball, you've done the rowing, you've been on air a lot, and sometimes you search for a word in your brain and a word just pops out. That's what I reckon happened there. I don't think she planned that at all, and I don't think she meant anything by it.
Oh, I definitely don't think she meant anything by it. I mean, we've all said things on the radio at times that can be misinterpreted, that maybe its definition can be a bit ambiguous, but you're not saying it with any malicious or deliberate intent. The classic example was Stephen Adams in the NBA when he referred to one of the other players as a cheeky monkey.
That's it.
Now, that is a terminology we use here in New Zealand to describe sometimes young kids or kids who are a bit mischievous.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, I have a sneaking feeling, though, that if that was me or you, we still wouldn't have a job
you'd be gone,
today.
mate.
We'd be gone.
You'd be gone. Yeah, and look, and that's the silly part of this, isn't it, Matt? That if that wasn't Isha saying it, and that apology, I felt awkward watching her do the apology and everything.
I just do not know. But sorry, Matt. I just do not know how the word primate, when you are dealing, I guess, with a team that is non-European of a different ethnic persuasion, somehow has any term of endearment associated to it.
Well, with 3 white men talking about this, and we got no right to even talk about it. That's my view.
Look, the wrong word is easy to say. We've all done it. You wish you could take it back immediately. I heard the apology. It was a reference to him being a prime specimen of being a primate. So it was all positive. And, I love a little bit of that. Look, there's two things about this. Is one, in every profession, there are areas that you can't go into. And to have a slip like this, it is human or primate, as you might like to say. But it's also something that you do get to consider. You do know that there's something going to come back at you if something like this comes out. And so how that word ends up in her mind to be used in a commentary, I don't know. I feel a little bit sorry for her, but as Watto says, it doesn't take much for a man to pass in commentary some sort of derogatory comment about how it's tough for women to come back from being mothers and going through childbirth to become a top-class athlete again. They get fired on the spot. They never appear again.
No.
Some of them get walked out of the commentary box as it's happening.
Let's talk about the cricket, though.
It's a bit of a different standard here because, I don't know why. Maybe it is the female
just
aspect.
weird.
Of course it is. That's just the political environment we live in, Matt.
Yeah.
The cricket, in terms of, before we get on to our lot here, which feels like a consolation prize, and I know I'm a Grinch and a bar humbug, but it does feel like a consolation prize because we got dicked in the first two. But Matt, that Australian cricket team of yours, mate. I mean, look, when you're down, you've got to stomp them into the ground, Watto, because they bounce back like a bloody rubber ball, don't they? And this is what we continually see. The thing I admire about the Australian cricket team, and I don't admire much, is the consistency of that side.
Yeah, well, the idea that you can be pummeled in the first test in Perth, where everyone thought that was probably going to be the first place to take a victory, and then come to Adelaide and be so dominant, it's amazing you can turn that around in less than a week.
Totally agree.
We've seen it with the Black Caps too, to be honest, but it was a surprising result. But, when you've got world-class players that step up, Smithy with his 100, back, some said maybe he'd never get another 100. One of the great batsmen leads the team. A couple of other boys jump on board. Next thing you know, you've got an unassailable lead.
Yeah.
And it is a strange thing to consider that you can be so good one week and so poor the next week, or the other way around. But we do see it all the time now, and I don't know if that is a level of cricket across the globe. That means that if you're not 100% on your game every week, you are going to get beaten. But it was a remarkable turnaround, and in a week in cricket, we've seen two series with pending imminent results that you wouldn't have thought about last week.
The caveat I'd put on that is England have already won the series, okay, and they won it handsomely within 3.5 days and within 3 days. And you've got to make now. I don't know whether that affects their mindset, but it certainly looked in their batting that they weren't really all there in Hamilton. Take nothing away from us thrashing them, but Mark, it just feels to me like there's just the thing that's missing is it doesn't count for anything.
Well, we said it last week. We said last week New Zealand will win this third test because, again, England, they've won the series. There's no jeopardy for them. But this is just so typical of New Zealand cricketers. They'll win this test. We'll talk about Kane Williamson's 33rd test 100. We'll talk about the Tim Southee, say goodbye, and yet we'll just, again, iron over all of the major cracks surrounding this New Zealand cricket team. And if you dare criticise, of course, we'll revert back to the series in India. It's been
we're going to be living on that for 30 years, mate, aren't we?
But also, too, I mean, you sit there and go, we could have probably declared at 550. We probably could have declared at 500 or 450 even. But you still sense, no, let's go and give Tim another bat.
Yeah, that's right.
But look, we've got weather that's a little bit dodgy. We could still potentially lose the next 2 days, but let's give Tim a bat. This is Tim's team. This is the club. He's chairman of the club. Just going back to the Australian cricket team, wonderful specimens, aren't you? I mean, almost describe them as just, I don't know, world-class primates, I guess you could probably use that terminology. That seems common these days in the vernacular, apparently. But I cannot stand the way they conduct themselves. I think they are bully boys. But they're bullies at home, Martin.
Hughes, they've changed, mate. Have they?
No.
No.
Oh, look, it's a tough environment.
Let's see how they go in India. Let's see how they go in India. Hey, can I say...
You give as good as you get. This is world-class sport. I mean, we're not friends out there.
We shouldn't be.
We're competing for the bickies. We're competing for the cookies, and we want to get it. Look, I'm going to flick back to the Black Caps because last week you asked us how Tim Southee would go when we all said he should be dropped for the test. I said he'd be lucky to get one. None for 44. If he had gone for another 20 runs, he may have taken a wicket on his average over the last 15 tests.
Yeah.
But the major story to me, the surprising major story is poor old Tim didn't get 100 sixes. Well, maybe he should have been going for a fiver in his last test
there you go.
rather than two more sixes
this is the frustrating thing. Look, I've got to the stage now where I can't listen to the TV commentary. I mute it when it comes on because it is just nauseating. And I know that, they're trying to attract a different audience, and I know that, their job is to be overwhelmingly positive, but there's also reality that needs... And the fact that we've never had this conversation about these players selecting themselves, that to me is the biggest cricket story of the year. It's bigger than India, that we had positive affirmation and confirmation last week from Gary Stead, that these guys choose themselves to play. And New Zealand cricket, it just goes to show how wimpy and ineffective that administration is. It is a disgrace that this is allowed to happen and has been allowed to happen for so long. That's why we haven't seen Will O'Rourke until this year. That's why we've seen these guys hang on like they hang. What other sports team in the world operates like that?
None. But
Zero.
It also take the Indian series out. It actually just reflects in our results, doesn't it?
You
this
can't
whole
take it
Gary
out.
Stead
You can't
just
take it
reflects
out.
in itself. Hey, have anybody seriously considered? And people have proposed this to me. We see India win that first test, then they're woeful again. They were woeful against us. Can I suggest? Look, is there anything sinister here?
Oh, please.
Is
If
there
it was
anything
Pakistan,
sinister here?
would be saying that, wouldn't we? But we would, seriously.
But why aren't we? Here's this team suddenly, and you just sit there. I've been to India, man. That whole society runs on corruption. That is the way it is. The more corrupt you are, the more respected you are. But you sit there and you go, well, hang on a minute. If it's too good to be true, is it too good to be legal, Martin?
Let's change tack and talk about Ezra Mam, the Brisbane Bronco. I'm just constantly stunned when a well-known sports person appears in court, that there is a different set of rules for that person. And you can't tell me that recently, we discussed this in the Tight Five, Sevu Reece didn't get another get-out-of-jail-free card for two pretty serious crimes that have both been discharged without conviction. And now Ezra Mam, $850, driving drugged up without a licence and smashes into a car and injures a child. Is 850? What is that? That's worth $850 and a bad boy. Is that right, Matt?
Well, I tell you what. If you read the Timaru court news on a weekly basis...
Like you do?
Pete, like I do, some of the most entertaining reading you can get in the country, to be honest.
Better than the death notices?
Much better. These people get big fines, they get big suspensions, and they get dragged over the coals. and nobody sees it. So the lesson isn't learnt by the wider community. What our young people get to see is guys like this living the high life, carrying on like an absolute dickhead, and then a small fine, an insignificant fine in the context
that's
of
it. What he earns.
What's $850 even mean to this bloke? I don't know what he's on, but it'll be huge money, and it all goes away. It's all okay. The players' associations and all these other groups, they don't tell their players what to do or how to go about it. Of course, they coach them through it. It's just it's the hypocrisy of the legal system, which is a legal system and not a justice system. Justice isn't often served, but the legal boundaries are often operated within, and these blokes get off. It's just a clown move.
It is.
If anyone could afford a taxi, it's probably him. And, the fact that he could have killed a child or someone else or himself or anyone else means $850 is just a joke. It's laughable. It's laughable, really.
But what it's done now, it sets a precedent, doesn't it? For society to work, as Matt said, you've got a legal system and a justice system. But for society to work, we actually have to have a justice system that is fair for all. Now, if you find yourself in a similar situation or no one in a similar situation, just take your lawyer and go, hey, Ezra Mam.
Yeah.
Hey, here's my $800. Here's my $800.
Yeah.
I expect
exactly
the same thing to happen
That's
for me
exactly
now.
it.
I haven't been on the cover of Women's Day. I haven't got a $1,000 an hour lawyer next to me, but I'm a member of society and I want it to be equal and
it's a
fair.
fair call.
And so that's, I guess, what comes out of all of this. But here it is. It's another little subplot that goes with rugby league. It's another narrative, like it or not. It still has people talking about rugby league, and for some reason, you just get this melting
rugby
pot.
league
You get
forgives.
both ends of the spectrum. They forgive.
forgives.
Everyone understands it's a blue collar sport. Everyone understands that a lot of these players, if it wasn't for league, would probably end up in jail. To be honest, but also look, I know a little story. I'm not going to delve thing, but I know of two high profile All Blacks years ago who were involved in a serious assault issue down in a small town in New Zealand, swept under the carpet, $200K paid by a certain New Zealand rugby union to make sure that was well and truly resolved and sorted out, and never made the press and never got to the courts.
That's the world we live in.
That's the world we do live in, Martin.
All right, let us wrap it up.
If you got the money, often your problems can go away. There's no two ways about that.
Let us wrap it up with, I want a sporting highlight and a moment of the year for both of you. And it can be anything at all. It can be any continent, any sport, any sports person. What are you first? Give us a couple of things that have really stood out for you this year, that have made you just love sport, because that's what we're here for.
Well, look, I have to say, I know how good Carrington was in terms of her 3 gold medals. And we've got to be careful here with Lisa because she's been so successful. I think sometimes we tend to want to go, oh, Carrington again, why can't it be somebody else? But as I say this, I don't think the Swiss ever stopped celebrating Federer. I don't think the United States ever stopped celebrating Tiger Woods. When you're good, you're good. However, my moment of the year probably goes to Kerr in the high jump. I think it's one of the real blue ribbon events. It's not a sport that we've had a legacy in. It's not a sport that you even expect New Zealand to do well. To win the Olympic Games gold in high jump is remarkable. And this is going to contradict a lot of what I've actually said, but I do have to go back, and I think in time history will tell it. I've got to say the series win in India 3-0 probably is the one that backs it up for me. I think that is the greatest Test series victory in the history of Test cricket played by any country. When you look at just how poor we are and how historically strong India have been and how they're the bully boys of the game.
Yep, and we did it without Kane Williamson. Matt, yours.
Did it without Kane Williamson. Isn't that amazing that one of the highlights for Watto is a series that he 5 minutes ago suggested was rigged?
Positive, Matt. Be positive. Come on, mate.
Anyway.
God, you're picking on me again.
It is a big moment. It is a big moment in time. Look, you asked me for 4 key moments, Marty, and I'll just quickly do them for you. The first one, because I love characters in sport and I love the unusual, Rachel Reagan Gunn. The kangaroo, the snake, the things that I could say about the performance would get me cancelled. Yeah. But the point is, she's memed. She's on T-shirts. The world knew who she was. It was a moment in time that we'll never forget. Afghanistan at the 2020
World Cup.
The T20 World Cup semi-finalists didn't go on to win, beat Australia and New Zealand in that series when nobody thought they'd even make it out of pool play. I've got here as my number 2, Mark, Lisa Carrington. Because what you're saying about expectation that she will do better again and again and those wins just compile, I think is true. But the way she presents herself, the way she presented herself in and around the other members of the team, the commitment, the ability to win 8 gold medals.
It's just wild.
And this is the interesting thing, Mark, because you mentioned the high jump, which is another tremendous moment. If Carrington was playing or involved in a more marquee sport, she'd be on magazines all around the globe. It just so happens that her ability and skill and commitment has been in a kayak. And I'm taking nothing away from that, but it doesn't get coverage every week tennis
true.
or golf or football or whatever else. But the big one for me this year is a diehard Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs fan.
Here we go.
10 years,
God,
10
I'm trying to
years
think
in
what
the
this is going to
wilderness.
be.
We haven't looked like we could even
Making
win
a top 8 in a competition where every second team qualifies, mate. Come on.
We made playoffs. And it has brought me back to the game.
You should go and work for New Zealand cricket with that attitude, mate. We
I
made the
am
playoffs.
looking forward to
We
another
made the
season.
playoffs.
If we can get a halfback
Matthew.
that's half playing the game like we expect, we could be another finalist team this year. I'm back on the doggies. I love the rugby league this year, but it's all about supporting the teams that you never give up on. And when you get a bit of a glimmer of hope, it's brilliant.
Can I just endorse?
Hey, Matt, quickly, were they smiling and having fun while they were playing? And
Yes, they were.
Okay, just
Yes, they
checking.
were.
Because that apparently is a performance criteria
Yes,
for us,
it
the
is.
New Zealand women's cricket team.
New Zealand women's
Josh
cricket.
Adokar smiling more than most.
Wait, okay,
because he got his charger back and he could get that iPhone charged back up. Apart from him, we were big smiles all year round.
Okay, I got 2, and I endorse all of those. I got 2, and it is the White Ferns, because I gave it to them big time, and so did you, because their results were appalling, but they won when it mattered most, and that's what cricket is. It's the T20 Women's World Cup world champions, and you can never take that away from them. But here's another name that I'll throw at you. Lulu Sun. I thought that story was one of the best stories of the year for New Zealand sport, that this young woman came out of nowhere and thrilled us all, making round after round and got through to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. And the other one is, of course, Liam Lawson getting a drive in F1, and I think that's extraordinary as well. So that plus, I'll add Chris Wood. Those are my favourite names of the year, in no particular order.
Nice eclectic mix, boys. I think we did well on that.
Yeah, I think we did too, actually. I did
Let's
look
end
at
it all
Lulu
with a
Sun
big
this morning.
happy primate, people. Sorry, don't.
Last working day of the year.
Cut that, cut.
Hey, and Martin, I've got a template for when you get cancelled. I know a little bit about it.
Happy Christmas, Twizel.
Happy Christmas, everyone. And we'll talk to you next year. Thanks, guys.
The DSPN.
That's our podcasting show for today. Again, if you're liking what you're listening and what you're seeing, then a small favour, if you will. Can you please hit like, share, subscribe, follow, tell a friend about it. We are a fledgling podcast and show, the DSPN, and we need you. And if you are participating, well, just click that subscribe button. That would help enormously. Thank you so much if you already have. Again, tell a friend if you like. We're doing this every single day, putting out a show every afternoon. The DSPN.
This is the DSPN.